Next Pats podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry, back from vacation to talk a little math with you all, just what everybody has been looking for. I'm kind of serious. We've been talking so much about DeAndre Hopkins, whether or not the Patriots should sign him, how aggressive they should be to go and get this guy who might be able to complement the receivers they already have on the roster, maybe knock Devontae Parker down to being a number 2. Kendrick Bourne becomes a number 3. Tyquan Thornton becomes and look what you have. And look what you have. And you're also able to sustain an injury on top of it. But money's an issue. It always is. And with DeAndre Hopkins, that is certainly the case here. So to discuss Hopkins, how much he should be paid, whether or not the Patriots should be interested, and also to give us a big picture look about how the Patriots are approaching their finances, period. We brought in our friend Brad Spielberger from Pro Football Focus. He is their salary cap expert, incredibly intelligent man. And that's what we need when it comes to crunching the numbers and breaking down the salary cap and the cash spending and all of these things that we have discussed on this podcast, on our television shows, our Bella Early Edition, Boston Sports Tonight. To wrap our arms around what the Patriots are doing in that regard, I think will give us a better sense of what they might be, what's coming next in 2023 for the New England Patriots. Really interesting conversation with Brad, because for a team and for a fan base that I think is expecting the team to take a leap and to become really a contending type of organization this year, even if they're not expected to win the division, even if they're not expected to go to the conference finals, to make the playoffs, to win a playoff game, I think it's fair to expect that based on the last several years of what the Patriots have done and have not been able to do. I think it's okay to have those high expectations, especially when you look at the coaching staff and the pieces they've added. And when you look at the roster, which isn't going to be near the top 10 on anybody's list, but certainly has the pieces to make a push for the postseason. Should we be dialing those expectations back a bit based on how they've handled the team, how they've added to the team, how they've spent their money, how Bill Belichick is handling the books? Because Robert Kraft has made it very clear. Money is no object. Bill Belichick has been told the money is no object. Anytime he has come to Robert Kraft to discuss cash spending or contracts, he hasn't been told no. Robert Kraft is on the record this offseason saying as much. So this is a Bill Belichick build. What is Bill Belichick telling us about his team and how he views it in the way that he's built? We're getting to all of that with Brad Spielberger. Let's start that conversation for you right now. All right, there he is, Brad Spielberger of Pro Football Focus. He is their salary cap analyst. He contributes to the great site, overthecap.com. If you're interested in anything as it pertains to cap, cash, how teams are built, if you're interested in a lot of the things that we talk about on this podcast, obviously you have to check out Brad's work. He is at PFF_Brad, but Over the Cap is really the site you want to go to for all those nitty gritty details. Brad, thanks so much for being on with us, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back.
So we did have you on, I believe it was 2 seasons ago now. And at the time, you told us you felt as though Bill Belichick was not only the greatest coach of all time, but also the greatest general manager of all time. So before we get into this big picture discussion that I'm dying to have with you about the Patriots, where they are now, what are they doing from a team building standpoint, I want to ask you why you felt that way about Bill Belichick at the time, and if there's anything that he does in terms of how he manages the team's finances in particular that make him such a revered figure for you.
Yeah, I think when you look at his entire body of work, the couple things he does that maybe you could say are not the norm are making a lot of tough decisions, moving on from players, but maybe even moving on early and ensuring you get draft capital in return, or at least compensatory draft capital. Just always maximizing. Players aren't assets. I hate to say that, but like maximizing every single asset you have and never letting yourself miss out on any opportunity, because every transaction comes with an opportunity cost. So I think that's one. And then the second one, maybe we'll get into a little bit is they zag when everyone else is zigging and just do things differently. And of course, the process is great. The results have to follow, but doing things like paying in a market that a lot of people just don't participate in, which is kind of mid-tier or lower tier veterans. And again, it's got to work, but I think just there's not, lazy is the wrong word, but there is it's easy to kind of just follow the status quo, just do what everyone else is doing and kind of just hope things work out. I think it takes a little bit more gusto, a little bit more guts to say, we're going to try something different. There's no assurances that it goes well, but we're going to try and see what we can get out of it.
Yeah. The approach to signing some of these quote unquote middle tier vets, as you call them, and you're not taking that stars and scrubs approach where you're paying a couple of guys all of your available funds. And then you've got you've got 50 guys that are on rookie contracts. That obviously is an extreme, but to be in that market, is there evidence in a non-Tom Brady world that can work, Brad? Obviously, I think they're still kind of operating in that way to some degree. We're all looking at it, we're like, they're not paying the quarterback and they don't have any big money guys, but they don't have they're actually in the top 10 in terms of cap space right now, but it's not like they're swimming in cap space. So where's all the money going? And it's going to guys like, Devon Godshaw and Hunter Henry. And you've got a big dead cap charge on Jonnu Smith and guys. These guys aren't stars, but they are being paid. Can it work that way is my question for you.
So I think here's where it spills onto the football field is first, I think the stars and scrubs approach, like you mentioned, I think a lot of teams say, okay, we'll pay the guys that can play 80% of snaps and can play all three downs and are well-rounded, good football players. And I think Bill still, whether it's a defensive back or an offensive player, says, I have a particular role that's going to work for 200 snaps a season, but I'll pay for that and I'll keep that guy around. And I find value in that. And I do think, look, last year's unit being number one in expected points allowed is insane. Like Matthew Judon was the highest paid player on the defense, making less than $14 million a year. And I think in part it's because they beat up on a lot of very bad teams, which you could poke holes in and say maybe that's not a good thing. But I think it's actually because of those investments where they're going to win a bunch of matchups or make sure they can really beat down on these bad teams by having those expenses. So the question of cap space is, they don't want to prorate a ton of money right now. So the reason why they're not like way off the top, number one in cap space right now, even though they're 31st in cash spending, is they're also being patient and paying their players year to year. And to tie this back to Tom Brady, I suppose, when he went to Tampa Bay, before he got there, they didn't prorate contracts. They did not give signing bonuses. There was nothing prorated. And so it was kind of the same thing. But then once he got there, they started prorating everything. I think the Patriots example is, okay, let's say Mac Jones hits, or let's say we go after a veteran, or, we make that next move a quarterback. If we then want to push a bunch of cap into the future and spend aggressively, we can do that. We won't have a bunch of sunk money already.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm glad we're talking about quarterbacks, because it really does, when we're talking about finances in the NFL, it all does kind of revolve around that position. And I really enjoyed listening to you. You're on the Athletics NFL podcast recently with Robert Mays, and you were asked, are teams essentially operating in one of two buckets, either the quarterback on the rookie salary or the highly paid quarterback salary? And you said, yeah, that's basically it. It's about that simple. There's only two buckets. I'd love to tell you there's more than that. What have you made of how the Patriots have operated in this Mac Jones era? Let's call it, these last couple of years, because you mentioned it. They are 31st in cash spending this year. They're scheduled to be 31st next year. And I think they're 32nd. They're last in the league in 2025. And that obviously can change quite a bit depending on moves that they are able to make. But it feels like the approach has been spend on the rest of your roster when your quarterback isn't making a lot of money. That's how it feels like a large chunk of the league has approached their team building. Have the Patriots done it differently? And why do you think, if that is the case, why do you think that might be?
Yeah, the really fascinating thing with them is they had their big splurge. So we have seen a trend the last couple of years of probably the last 5-6 years of if you have a good rookie contract quarterback, either going into their second season or going into that third season. So before the 5th-year option decision, a lot of teams would go crazy. I mean, look at Chargers last year, Dolphins and Bengals to a degree, for Cincinnati, that's the full 2020 class. I guess the Eagles as well with Jalen Hurts. And you go back and you'll see that trend, the Cardinals and the Giants with Murray and Jones, etc. With the Patriots, they did it in the rookie season right before they drafted Mac Jones, right? They set a record for total guarantees given out to free agents in an offseason and then drafted Mac Jones on top of that. So I think you just kind of move the timeline up a little bit, and now they're being patient and genuinely on, like, if Mac Jones made back-to-back playoff runs, was awesome last year, I could see New England potentially having spent a bunch this offseason, but instead I think they're being patient and waiting and seeing how things play out, because they don't want to spend a bunch if they don't know how Mac Jones is going to ultimately pan out, after his third year.
So is it fair to say that, because I've sort of viewed it this way, where when you do look at teams and how much they're spending in terms of their cash, those are the teams that are really near the top of that list are the teams that believe that they're in their championship window. It's time to go all in. It's time to make a push. It's time to be aggressive. So with the Patriots being near the bottom of that list this year and next year, is it fair to say that's an indication, or it should be an indication to us, that they just don't see this as a championship or a true contending window? Because it's funny, what we're hearing from ownership, Brad, doesn't necessarily jive with how they have spent. They're not one of those aggressive teams right now, and it looks like they might not be next year. And yet we're hearing from Robert Kraft, hey, it's been we haven't won a playoff game since Super Bowl in 2018, and we haven't been to the playoffs 2 of the last 3 years. That's not what we're looking for. That's not acceptable. But is their spending telling us how they truly feel about their roster?
I think something that he would never admit the rest of his life is that and I think he deserves credit in a general sense for this, is I've always felt Bill Belichick does one of the better jobs of, I think some GMs get obsessed with, okay, what was my roster last year? How can I make this roster better? And I sometimes kind of ignore external factors. And I think Bill Belichick, you look at the rest of the AFC East right now, and I know no Patriots fan wants to hear this, but I mean, the Jets, Bills, and Dolphins, once the Jets move a bunch of Rodgers' salary forward, they're kind of waiting on that. But once they do that, they're all going to be top 5 in cash spending in the NFL. And they're going to have New England down in 31st. And so I think to a degree, he's also saying, why spend a ton to get into the top 15 or top 20 when we have 3 division rivals, one of which the Jets, they probably have a 2-year window and then everything kind of starts over. And Miami, if Tua doesn't work out, they have to kind of restart at quarterback, and they have some older contributors there as well. Let's wait for them to kind of flush through this window. And then again, we can maybe capitalize on that and pounce when those 2 teams are down. Buffalo's going to have Von Miller and Stephon Diggs, and a lot, both safeties are 32, 33. Like, they're going to have to turn over that roster as well. I think maybe that is a factor to a degree. He'll just, of course, never ever say that at a podium, and I don't blame him.
Well, and it is interesting. One thing that he did say at a podium, it was the day after the season ended. I don't know how much of this you would have been able to see in real time, Brad, but we were asking him questions, and he was asked a question about that big free agent class that they had right before they drafted Mac Jones. And the question was essentially, do you feel like you've gotten good bang for your buck from that group? Because, Johnny Smith hadn't done much at all. Jalen Mills wasn't playing by the end of last year. It was, it's been very mixed in terms of the results outside of really Judon, and Devon Godshaw has been a good defensive tackle, but he's a defensive tackle. So, and his answer was interesting because he brought up that the team was, if you actually looked at it in a 3-year window, the team was actually 27th in spending. So he was trying to say, well, you guys think that we were spending all this money here and we're out of the playoffs again, but in reality, we're near the bottom of the league in terms of spending. Why do you think he would have said that? Because do you think he's trying to tell us, hey, we're rebuilding here and trying to knock down expectations? Do you think he was, I don't know, he was sort of trying to boast in some way that, hey, we're actually still in the mix, even though we're one of these lower spending teams? Robert Kraft has come out since then and say, hey, money's no object. I don't really know why he mentioned that. And Bill himself, he has sort of walked that back. He said, hey, I'm not making commentary on ownership. It's just, it is what it is. What would be your insight into that if you hear Bill Belichick say that at the podium? Again, it was sort of a rare moment of honesty, and it was insight that he wasn't even asked to share, that he went out of his way to share.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. I think there, again, you kind of, like you said, you have to be nuanced with how you go about talking about things. I think it's a way to say we're super young with a bunch of rookie contract players that we're trying to build and develop, and we don't want to just spend on top of them and not let them grow within our construct. I think it is to a degree saying, yeah, we made the playoffs in 2021 or whatever it is, with a cheap roster, not a super, expensive unit. And I think, honestly, it also maybe in his mind is tying back to, I always say this, like, look, I'm not going to make excuse for every bad move he's made, but like, I don't think Bill Belichick in a vacuum trades for Mohamed Sanu or does some of the things that he did towards the tail end of the Tom Brady era when they were trying to milk every last drop and see what they could do. I think he acted outside of his character and did things he would never want to do normally. And so I think maybe to a degree, he wanted to kind of reset the books, reset everything. But again, though, understanding like he's not being cheap, or he's not accusing Robert Kraft of being cheap. I think it's just saying like we're in a new phase and we're willing to spend a ton of money if we think it's worth doing, but we're not going to just spend for the sake of spending, which a lot of bad organizations have tended to do.
Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you could spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/NBCSB to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/NBCSB. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Hope is here. GamblingHelplineMA.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support. Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 New York. 21 plus in present and select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit FanDuel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Tennessee, or Virginia. 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342 in Arizona. 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana. 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas. 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit www.mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming or visit www.1800gambler.net in West Virginia.
If you were to look at their contracts, Brad, and just how the team is built right now, and you see, interesting to look at over the cap, and they have, the cash to cap ratios there. And almost every team in the league is spending, in terms of cash, a little bit more than what the cap is actually set at. There's 3 teams, along with the Patriots, I guess, and I want to make sure I have this right, that are actually below that number, right? So they're, when you're talking cash to cap, they're below a 1-for-1 dollar sort of ratio. It's the Bengals, the Commanders, the Chiefs, and the Patriots are actually lowest on that list. If you were to strip away that this was the Patriots and that Bill Belichick was the head coach and Robert Kraft was the owner, would you look at their books, or what we know of their books, and call them a rebuilding team?
Yeah, I would, frankly. I mean, they've had some bigger draft classes too, where you had stretches with the suspensions and things of that nature, and forfeited picks where not only were you selecting from 29 to 32 every single year, but you maybe didn't have a first or didn't have a second, or had traded away some picks as well. So, I think that's part of it as well. Is now you've had these 8+ player draft classes. You're picking a little bit earlier than you're used to, and maybe hoping to kind of get some of those foundational pieces with those early draft picks. And again, and I mean, they kind of have finished around 500, which is sort of purgatory to a degree, but again, not chasing mediocrity. You'd rather be very, very good, or not be very, very bad, but not try and spend and go crazy just to be above average. And I think he understands that to a degree as well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting just to see and this leads us to our next part of our conversation. If they're willing to spend on DeAndre Hopkins, is there part of Bill Belichick that says, hey, the owner really wants to win, and I'm getting close to this Don Shula record, and I'm into my 70s now, and maybe I should be a little bit more aggressive. Maybe this is one instance where, hey, this is one of the reasons why you don't spend all that money to this point, is so that you have the flexibility to, when a guy becomes available, maybe splurge a little bit. DeAndre Hopkins still a pretty good player. I mean, he's not an all-pro anymore, but 700 yards in 9 games in a pretty bad offense last year in Arizona. So I put it to you, Brad. What do you think a DeAndre Hopkins deal should look like? And to what lengths should the Patriots be willing to go for him?
Yeah, I think at this point, I would think that around a 1-year, $10 million base value, I'm sure with some incentives that he'll ask for to try to, get more than that. And even that might be lofty. And I'm guessing he's trying to get that around that value from a contending team. And maybe the only offers he has so far is around that value from, Patriots, Titans type clubs. But I'd be fine with that. And my justification for, if you wanted to argue, is that unnecessary spending? Does it actually move the needle all that much? Finding out what you have in Mac Jones by providing him with a number 1 receiving option, which also has the benefit of, knocking Parker and Bourne and and Tyquan Thornton and all those guys down a peg. Like it shows you, it teaches you a valuable lesson. And I think there is value inherently in that type of deal.
How about Dalvin Cook? That's the other name that's just been floating around here. I do think they need another running back to kind of help spell Ramondre Stevenson, who really ran out of gas, but was probably their best offensive player last year. Is that somebody who's really going to seek and maybe find a deal that pays him almost in the same range that you just mentioned, $9 million, maybe $10 million, or is it going to come in much lower than that for him, do you think?
I think it'll be way lower than that. So, from Patriots standpoint, I do agree they probably could use more behind Ramondre, but I think maybe you look at third down, goal line type backs, or I don't know, a Leonard Fournette type of guy in a different role because you have maybe some connections there. Dalvin, I think, wants to step in and be a 3-down workhorse back, and I just don't think it's necessary. But yeah, to the point of, is he going to get 9-10 million? I mean, I'd be shocked. He is 27 and has good volume stats the last couple of years, but in July, for a veteran running back in the current market we're operating in, I mean, if he gets $9-10 million in a season, his agent we should throw the guy a parade at this point.
All right, will be very interesting to see what the Patriots are able to do between now and the start of season, potentially to improve their roster. But maybe they're just taking sort of a realistic approach right now, and it doesn't make all the sense in the world for them to be overly aggressive. Brad Spielberger, thanks so much for breaking it all down for us. We need a big brain to bring in every once in a while, Brad, to help us crunch the numbers. You, my friend, are the best in the business when it comes to doing that. So thanks again for being with us.
We're too kind. Thank you, man.
Great stuff there from Brad. I know I learned something from listening to him today. Hopefully you all did as well. Hopefully you all have downloaded the NBC Sports Boston app. If you haven't, you can find a link to do exactly that in the show bio. It's unbelievable. All the videos, stories you need to stay up to date with all of your local teams. It's right there, the NBC Sports Boston app. If you haven't gotten it yet, what are you doing? Figure it out. You've got the time. It's July. All right, now that I've reprimanded everyone, feels like a good time to say goodbye. Hopefully, everyone's enjoying the weather. You're at the beach. You're at the pool. You're enjoying vacation. If you're working, hopefully you're not working too hard. Hopefully you're listening to this podcast while you're at work to help get you through the day. We appreciate you. We appreciate everyone that's left comments on the YouTube page, everyone that's left comments in our Apple Podcast comments section. We're going to get to some of those. We're going to do a big mailbag episode at some point between now and the start of the season. We have a handful of big picture topics that I still want to get to, but I wanted to tackle this one first because DeAndre Hopkins, he's still out there. He's still floating around. Felt like a good time to have a money conversation. When we have the time to get into some of these bigger picture topics, we got to do it. Thanks again to Brad Spielberger. Thanks to John Henry, the Skull Crusher, for producing this episode, as he does every single week. Thanks to you all for listening. We'll talk to you very soon.